Hi, this is Mo. Luba, I have unmuted you, so if you'd like to kick off the webinar, it looks like we're good to go. Welcome, everybody.
Oh, thank you, Mo. Welcome, everyone, to the March 11th Standards Alignment Advisory Committee meeting. And for the first time, I'm today not in the office. I'm trying to do it for the first time. To do it like a webinar, like a real webinar. That's what you do every single time. So it's a new experience for me, and it's an exciting experience for me. So we'll see how it will work. And I will ask Harriet to start us with the agenda and our overview of the standards writing process, and then others will chime in, as well as I will talk later about community input.
Harriet, I've unmuted you as well.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you. Hi. Welcome.
Okay, good.
Let's move to the next slide. So our agenda for today is alignment writing process status update. It's Harriet will start us with, then standards writing review, and we will look at specific two examples, so you will understand better how we are implementing basic principles of the alignment process and how actually the new proposed language may look like in different standards. And then I will talk about community input report, and you have a draft of it. And I apologize that we're a little bit late with that, but we've been able to finalize it and bring it to your review today. And we can talk a little bit more at the end of my presentation on the community input report. What will be the timeline to bring back the comments and your feedback on the report. And then Valisa will talk about our alignment communication plan. We started it last time, and you also have a handout that gives you some type of perception and perspective how we're thinking about it. And then Harriet will summarize and finalize with next steps our conversation for today. So let's move to the next slide, and Harriet will start.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. So I'm just going to get us started with a reminder about where we are in the process. This, work has been going on for quite a while now, and as people know, we're basically in the phase where people are working on writing the standards, developing the implementation plan, and we are working with both the steering committee and the advisory committee on reviewing drafts, and as Luba said, reviewing input that was received in the fall from all of the community meetings. This phase basically of the work now will lead us into more intense work at the community level in the spring. So I've now moved on to that second row, basically where there will be additional opportunity for community input and community feedback. And then also in the spring, there's an expectation of some negotiation around standards with SEIU. And then in the summer, the timeline calls basically for making the WACs available, basically publicly available through the official process and receiving official public comment. And then in the fall, basically being able to finalize the standards and do all of the rest of the legal niceties around the rulemaking with presentation of the standards. And then really importantly, something that comes up over and over again with this group, and I think with staff at Dell and people all around the state, which is making sure that the implementation plan is in excellent order so that all of this planning work really works well for the providers and for the families and the children who are participating. So with that as an intro, if we could go to the next slide. So I'm just going to give a brief update basically on the standards writing. And the good news is that the writing team has been working very hard, and they have gotten themselves actually more than 80% through the drafting, basically the first drafts for the licensing. And I think, as we've mentioned, there's been good collaboration in that team, and people are really drawing upon a lot of different expertise to be able to move the process forward. Basically, in the phasing of the work, the focus initially has been child outcomes, family engagement and partnerships, professional development and training, and then the second phase has been environment, interactions, curriculum administration, and oversight. And between those, as I've said, we're up to well over 80% of the standards being written. I want to keep going through this because I know we want to actually look at some of the samples with Debbie. So if we could get to the next slide, and then after that I'll turn things over to Debbie. So we've been having review teams basically, and the review teams have been reviewing for the core principles that we all laid out for the process. So that means that we're looking at the content of the standards for alignment, the progression issues, elimination of duplication, consistent language, and then, of course, incorporation of feedback from the community input sessions, the work that's been done on dual language learners, the work on cultural inclusion, and caring for our children basic standards. The second level review team basically will use the same lens for taking a look at this, and then there will be a third review team to try to really make sure that the whole fits together and that there are not gaps and consistency, and that we've honored basically all of the issues we put on the table about efficiency and duplication and simplicity. So that part of the process is coming along well, and I think the structure is working well. Having said that, I think that we're eager to take a look at what this means in a more practical sense and not just at the conceptual level. And I think Debbie is on the phone with us and will look over some of the examples for us now.
Can you hear me?
Debbie, I've unmuted you. Are you there?
Okay, thank you.
I
thought it was awfully quiet.
A little delay there, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you for being here this morning with us. You should have two different drafts to take a look at. We wanted to show you some examples of a couple of the different ones. And so this slide that you see in front of you right now is from the environment section regarding activities. So the use of TV, video, and or computers would be included in here. So just as a recap on this slide, and then we can refer to the handouts once we talk through this a little bit. So if TV, video, or computers are utilized within a program, there are some limitations there regarding the content, what ages are involved with that, and time limitations on what's being spent during the day using those tools. And then the writing guidance on this particular draft was from the Family Home WAC because there was no current center language regarding TV or video or computers. And so the language was aligned for both programs. And then you'll see once we get to the handout, the progression along the way through the different programs, which is going to demonstrate education and more active engagement with the children if screen time is being used in the program. So I'm going to refer you to the actual handout if you have that in front of you. And I'll kind of talk through a couple of things just to make sure how the layout is managed and make sure you understand how it's delivered here. So if you're seeing the gray highlighted section, that should be the first page. These are recommendations from the writers based on what they have written as a new standard that would be removed. So if it's gray highlighted, that would mean we've covered that in our writing. So it's going to show you the Family Home WAC, and as I said earlier, there's no center WAC, but then it also shows the Early Achiever standards, and at this time there was no current standard with ECAP.
regarding the TV use. And so if you turn to page 3 on this particular handout, it will show you all in one view the progression through the WAC standard, early achievers, and ECAP. So you can actually see what's the amount of screen time that would be allowed by WAC, and then some educational opportunities once you get to the early achiever level, and then ECAP, again, the limitation on the amount of time that would be allowed during the program for the day. So this is how the progression would work. And then once you look at the bottom of page 3 on this handout, you can see the justification. So it's outlined under each level why the WAC was written a certain way. It could have been the alignment analysis, what the recommendations were with early achievers or ECAP, taking a look at the level from Caring for Our Children and aligning those standards as well. And so that was used as a resource tool for this particular draft. Do we want to maybe talk through both of the drafts and then maybe take feedback and questions, or what would work best?
So, Maureen, will you let us know if there are any questions that people are typing? At the end of Debbie's presentation, there will be time for us to discuss it. But for now, Debbie, you can maybe go to the second handout while people are still processing and typing their questions.
Great. Okay. So the next handout is also from environments, but it's in regards to space and furnishings. And this is the indoor license space category. And so as a recap, we have combined the family home and the center language to align those standards with the 35 square feet, and then increase, if there's an infant, we increase that space to 15. So it would be 50 square feet if you have infants in care. And we did incorporate some of the ERS into WAC level in this particular draft based on the alignment recommendations. And early achievers level expands in that draft writing in regards to what can be done, what more can be done in the space allowed. And then because this would be an example of the ECAP standard that has already been met at WAC level, and so there's no increase of what needs to be done if it's an ECAP program. And so again, if you look at the handout, again, that gray highlighting on the handout, which has, actually you can actually see it with WAC, early achievers, and ECAP levels, that recommendations are being made based on the writing that those standards would be eliminated because of the combined language. So if you keep turning, this one's a long one, so if you keep turning, the actual progression language for the proposed standard is clear back on page 5. So if you turn to page 5, you will see only WAC standard written and early achievers, because, as I said earlier, the ECAP standard would have been met based on how the WAC is being proposed. The justification section on this particular handout, if you turn, is all the way back to page 7. And again, the recommendations from Caring for Our Children was taken under consideration with this particular standard writing, and especially in regards to the square footage and also what would be the best for infant square footage, being 50 feet in all programs. There is a definition section. We don't always have that in our draft writing, but in this particular one we do have a definition section in regards to licensed space, unlicensed space, and then what would be inaccessible to children. Be clear on, if it's included in the draft writing, that we're clear on what that means in the definitions. So those are our 2 sample drafts, and I will open it up for feedback or input or questions from anyone.
Maureen, if you do have some questions, could you please read it for us?
Yeah, no questions so far. Oh, wait, here we go. We have unlicensed ECAP facilities. How will this impact them? The space is required, or the space required.
Can you please read it one more time?
Pardon?
Yeah, so Luba, this is Nicole. So Maria's asking, it's the question about unlicensed ECAP facilities. So we have unlicensed ECAP facilities. So how will this language impact them?
So unlicensed ECAP facilities, and I think this is something that Nicole may say more, but as we know, Early Start Act is requiring us that all ECAP providers will follow the licensing regulations. So it means that at some point of time when we will start implementing aligned standards, there will be a process of transitioning unlicensed ECAP providers to be able to meet the licensing regulations.
Correct.
And I know that this conversation already started with ECAP. At the same time, I don't want anyone to become anxious right now because we are right now in the process of writing the standards. We're not in the process of implementing them yet. So there's time to think about how it may look like, what particular tools we use to transition, what timeline will be behind it, and so on. So I will give it to Nicole if there's anything else you would like to add, Nicole.
Sure. Thanks, Luba. So I would just say that we briefly started this conversation with ECAP directors, and we'll continue the conversation through webinars and our steering committee with them in regards to timelines. One of the things that I would just request in this definition of licensed space is that what we're really saying is that this space applies to licensed child care and ECAP. And so when we're just talking about that the space on the premises is approved by the department for the purpose of providing licensed child care, we need to somehow broaden that definition so that it encompasses ECAP providers as well. Even though they will be licensed, ECAP providers don't necessarily think about themselves as child care providers. So we want to make sure that people can see themselves in the definition.
Are there any more questions or comments?
Not right now. Ready to go to the next slide?
Yes, let's go to the next slide.
Okay, here you go.
So I will talk a little bit about community input report, and you do have a handout or the copy of the draft or the final draft of the report. And as we discussed last time, we agreed that you will have 2 weeks to review the report and provide me with your comments and recommendations. So then we will incorporate it into the report, and after that the report will be published. So you have 2 weeks till the end of March to look at the report and provide me with your comments and recommendations. Please send them to me directly. The report is not big. At the end of the summary of the report, you can find a link to the raw data. Thrive by 5 developed a shared place on Google Drive, so everyone can access and take a look at the raw data to regional coalitions. So it's all organized by folders. So if you would like to go to the raw data, you have an access to it. So I will give you right now a very brief overview what we've been focusing on. So when we look at the, can we go back to the first slide? Yeah, thank you. So when we've been analyzing the data, we've been focusing on those 4 questions. What proposed changes to align standards are being promoted by the community? What are the key messages and broad feedback provided by the communities on standards alignment? What are the main ideas and themes? And we talked about it last time, how we've been grouping the comments and identifying the significance level of one type of comments versus other type of comments, and other qualitative and quantitative patterns or themes in the community feedback. So going to the next slide, It's where their significance to data is showing us the particular topics that the community comments been focusing on. And we identify specific topics per content area. So as you see, for child outcomes and family engagement, for child outcomes it's developmental screening, for family engagement is more focused on dual language learners and how families will be informed, specifically families of dual language learners. And then environments is furnishings for routine care, learning, and relaxation. And a lot of conversations around differences in different type of settings, as well as different type of programming and different type of philosophies. A lot of conversations in regard of soft furniture or different type of side furniture, how it will be applicable or not applicable to licensing standards. So this is kind of a core type of comments that you can find in the raw data around environment. Also meals and snacks. A lot of comments on cultural relevancy and our connection to USDA requirements. Then for interactions, content area, the core piece has been an expulsion and discipline and restraint. And I don't think I have to explain to you why majority of comments been focusing on those two areas. Then in professional development and staff support, majority of the comments been about education requirements for different type of positions, roles, and responsibilities at different type of settings, and how the requirements are aligned or not aligned, and what type of additional training may be needed, and what type of additional things maybe we may need to take into consideration, like for example, the experience in the field or degrees that been brought from other countries and so on. And in unaligned licensing standards, the focus was on administration. So what type of administrative type of regulations we need to consider for all of the types of programming, for all of the types of settings. So let's go to the next slide. And as any collection of data, the community input data definitely has some limitations. And we already talked about inequitable representation of participants, that definitely giving us not fully reliable data because in different regions, different groups been recruited and different level of participants been representing the community. So we cannot say for sure that it's fully that this data is fully representing the whole state. We also know that the big group of stakeholders as parents and families were not represented fully and did not participate actively because we've been not specifically focusing on recruiting them and bringing them to the community input conversation. This is something that's been brought to our attention last time, how we're thinking about it, organizing the community feedback process. So this is definitely a limitation of the data. Also, we've been not focusing specifically in collecting a list of inconsistencies and duplications in early achievers, ECAP, and licensing standards. So we don't have a full list of all of the inconsistencies and all of the duplications and all of the kind of overlaps in the language or differences in the language. So this is something that we may need to think about, and WASP has been bringing this point for a pretty long time, as we all know. So this is something that we may need to approach from maybe collecting additional information on this particular topic and asking our stakeholders as well as parents to participate in a survey where they can actually share their experiences with inconsistencies and share their experiences with duplications. So we possibly will create a full list of different type of inconsistencies within those three subsets of regulations and standards. And there, one more limitation is that we does not fully consider inconsistencies and duplications with other standards. For example, Head Start and Early Head Start, military care, school-age licensing, Montessori, and so on. We may need to also think about would we include in the survey around licensing early achievers and ECAP also additional questions about what are the type of inconsistencies we may be able to consider right now. It's definitely obvious that we will not be able to consider all of them, but I'm more than sure that there specific ones that we definitely may consider and align with the new proposed standards. So with this, I will give you time to ask questions or provide additional comments if you do have some. And also think about the survey. Will it be something that you believe will be helpful for us to have right now? And we can start it before the feedback process and run it through the feedback process in a parallel with the feedback process. So we will have both sets of data. Comments, questions, recommendations?
Nothing at this time, Luba.
Okay, if you're processing, please type. So we will move forward with Valisa bringing to us communication plan, but at the end of our conversation, I'm more than sure that you will have some recommendations and comments. So do we have Valisa, who is unmuted, so she can talk?
Oh, I'm sorry, who?
Valisa?
Ah, there you are. Valisa, are you there?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, my apologies.
No worries. Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to do a brief update from the discussion we had last month about the creation of a communications plan. And if you remember, the goal was to really start to think about how to talk about this work to various audiences and at various levels so that people are kept in the loop throughout the process, understand the progress to date and the final implementation plans all the way through. So we talked about that at the last meeting, and we also talked about that with the DEL steering committee. And what we heard was that there was a real demand to have more communication materials. People wanted to be able to understand it at various levels. They wanted support to be able to explain it and talk about it with external partners. And so we've just started on that process. The first part of starting on that is that DEL has begun taking a look at all of the channels that they're already using to reach people and looking for ways to embed these types of messages and materials into those existing communications channels. So for today, what we wanted to do was to show you a bit of a prototype of the first communication that we have developed, and that we're thinking of as a newsletter that would be ongoing. It was included today as an attachment. So if you want to open the Winter 2016 newsletter attachment, you'll see that we put together a very high-level overview of the alignment process for people who probably haven't been super deep in it but need to really understand it. So it's high level. It really starts to explain what is the alignment process, what is it trying to accomplish, what does it look like, so provide a few high-level examples, and then what is the process and timeline to that the standards alignment process is going to go through to get to a final product. So our questions that we wanted to ask for you today, and I know that this is probably an awkward format to provide feedback, so I would encourage you all to have a look at it. And if you don't have questions or don't have time to think about that today, it's to share feedback after today with Luba or others about, is this helpful? Is this something that you think that there's a need for this level? If not, is it too deep? Is it not deep enough? What other materials would be helpful? What are you hearing that you would like some support in being able to clearly and concisely message information back to your constituents? Is this the kind of thing you'd be willing to share so that we can have some common messages that come out from DEL, but also all of you and other partners about the progress to date on the standards alignment process? So I will stop there, let you all have a minute to take a look at the attached newsletter. If you have questions today, that would be great. If not, I would really appreciate it if you would take a look at that and think about what are the different communication supports that you need or that you think would be useful for others to help continue to move this work forward and provide the right level of information for people
in order to be able to solicit good information and good feedback from communities and beyond.
Hi, Belisa. This is Katie from the Head Start ECAP Association. So I want to thank you for thinking about different levels of detail and information that might be necessary. This document looks good, but I think most of our folks are pretty much aware in the Head Start ECAP world of this level of information, and we're all getting freaked out and would like to get really kind of deep in the weeds about what you're really talking about here on some of the alignment issues and proposals. So I guess when I think about what kind of information would be useful for directors, and Barb can speak to this, is I like the that side-by-side that we went over before so that I can tell what you guys are considering in those areas. I know that you've been thinking about misalignments and fixing things that way. Honestly, our people want to see it. We want to be able to have feedback on something that's a lot less vague than what we've talked about so far. So that would be my feedback for just representing the Head Start ECAP world, I guess.
Great. I think that's very helpful. One thing I will say is that in many ways, this conversation that we're having today and the advisory committee is to provide a really deep look at some of these specific issues. The communications plan will be a roll-up in many ways of that. I think like all the information you received today, like the community input report from Luba, the side-by-sides that you received from Debbie, those are all part of information that you have to go back. I don't know if that helps clarify it or not, but I think that yes, we know everybody wants more to look at. I don't know that we're going to have the full package that everyone wants to look at just yet, but certainly that's the way that.
For us, even if we are starting with whatever Dell has, I get that your piece of this is more broad, and that this may be something that we work out with Nicole and Luba. But as we move forward with more and more detail, we don't necessarily have to have all of the work dumped on directors at the same time. But I'm just saying that, I mean, our directors are deep in the weeds, much more so than I could ever assess from all the information that I see in these. And I just want the product to really reflect what's happening on the ground. And so, I mean, maybe we have some phased information sharing of what Dell has been up to in terms of that alignment work. I mean, it's obvious that you're starting. I like the way that you've described the stuff that we got a sample of today. So, and I know there's always a tendency to wait until everything is fully baked before we share it out. I'm saying that I don't think we have time for that. I think we need to get the information out so that we can have more valuable input.
Okay, well, I'm going to pass it to Luba to respond to that, because my understanding is that it is built into the timeline for the full, for a full review of the proposed aligned standards. But you can't have review until there's something to review, and to be quite frank, that's what's being developed right now.
Yep, I get that.
Yeah, thank you, and hi, Katie. Sorry I missed you. I'm not in the office today. So I agree that right now, as we all know, we're all eager to see how the product will look like. But in order to be able to review the product, we have to have a product. So what we're sharing with you is what we have. We're not hiding anything under the table and not showing it to you and making decisions behind your back. We're not doing that. And as you know, it's one of our principles of this process. We're as transparent as we could be. So as soon as something in a standard writing process is not going as smooth as we hope for, then we immediately are bringing it to the steering committee, and then we're bringing it to the advisory committee. Like, for example, next time we will discuss professional development requirements, because it's where we've been struggling to come up with a aligned solution, and we've been able to, with the writing team, come up with some recommendations and some ideas about it. And then next week we're bringing it to the steering committee, and after that it will come to the advisory committee for review. I'm just giving you an example. So as much as I understand the angst, and we're also anxious, at the same time we are showing you what we have. So I hope that you can help us to explain it to the field that this is what it is, and this is the information that we have for now. And based on our timeline, we will be ready to present a first draft not sooner than to the feedback process. And at the feedback process, we will focus on some specific areas where the community input been collected and been significant in regard of the community interest to talk about it. But at the same time, as we all know, the additional dependencies as negotiation with the union is a public comment process. And it's where we all have to be aware of all of those steps before the final product will be developed. And all of those steps are the opportunities for the community and for the Head Start and ECAP community to be a part of the process. We are more than open and would love to come to the ECAP directors and Head Start directors and talk about standards alignment, specifically about how standards alignment may impact them. And I'm offering it not for the first time. And if you'd like me to be part of this conversation, or the whole writing team to be part of this conversation with specifically WASA audience, we will be more than happy to do that.
So that'll be good. And Luba, I actually also think that going through the survey process that we talked about before, with not just Head Start ECAP, but also licensed childcare, to identify the misalignments that people are experiencing, is actually going to really help help folks believe that the process is listening to them. So, you know, and I thank you, and I understand the limitations that we have here, and I'll work with you going forward.
Yes, and again, I also would like you to know, as well as all of us to know and acknowledge, that Department of Early Learning is also approaching this process differently, and all our early start act processes differently as we've been approaching them before. We're definitely going for the full community engagement, which takes time, and also the full transparency, which means that it's a very deep and detailed work. And it's definitely a different approach for us, as well as it's a different approach for the field. So, and definitely knowing more creates additional questions. But I also would like us to know that additional questions doesn't mean that people are anxious in most of the cases. It just means that they're trying to understand what does it mean for them. So this is where WASA can help us tremendously to explain and educate and help ECAP and Head Start to understand what does it mean for them and how it may look like for them. So let's partner and figure out how to do it better. Any other comments, questions?
So Luba, this is Nicole, and Mo just passed a question to me. So the question is the Head Start ECAP concern about being held to licensing, is it a concern since they have not had to know that information before? And I would actually rephrase that question and say I think a lot of Head Start and ECAP grantees and contractors are aware of licensing standards and have met some standards above that in the past. There are some differences in some of those requirements, though, and so it's figuring out how those come together is sort of what I have heard. But I would defer to Barb, who is a ECAP director who's sitting in this room, or others on the call to provide their take on that.
And again, go ahead.
So I would have to agree that some of the ECAP providers and Head Start understand licensing that's coming new to them. However, ECAP providers that have been in a location where they haven't had to address those for a long, lengthy amount of time, some of those things will come kind of from the backside. My concern is when we're looking at new slots and we're looking at new providers and we're looking at not-for-profits and school districts building locations for new early learning environments. Some of the licensing concerns, and just have gone through this experience 7 weeks ago, some of the licensing concerns that are buried deep can come right back up at the bottom and really be cumbersome. So some sort of information needs to be supplied to providers so that we can have an understanding of some of those things that can come at the last minute that can really cause some issues when we're looking at licensing concerns.
Oh, absolutely. And I think what we also have to consider that right now in ECAP standards and how ECAP standards been developed, there is a subset of the rules or standards that specifically are talking about health and safety. So this is what you actually have to consider or think about. Those specific health and safety standards, they overlap and they duplicate to their licensing standards. So all of the programmatic standards of ECAP will stay with ECAP. Only those that are relevant to the health and safety will be covered by licensing. So this is something that from the standard perspective you have to understand. So this is how the standards for ECAP will be changing. I'm talking about the standards process. But how it will be implemented, this is, again, one more question that we just unfortunately didn't get to yet as we are still developing the standards. So as soon I'm looking at the timeline right now, and I do believe that as soon as April, closer to May, it's where we will be able to start talking about how it will be implemented, how it will look like. Right now, we don't know for sure because some core standards in our progression are not developed fully yet. So as much as I would like to answer the questions, as much as Nicole would like to answer those questions, we don't have an answer yet. We have some ideas, but at the same time, the community input bringing additional information, and we're making additional adjustments to what we created as options, as you remember. So I understand that the angst is something that any change is developing, but at the same time, we also have to know that implementation will not start in November of 2016. November 2016 is a deadline for the standards or the draft of the standards. Then they will have to start thinking how we will implement it. So I do believe we have time to unpack all of the needed concerns or all of the concerns that we have and figure out how to proceed with implementation. So again, I would love to sit down with ECAP and Head Start directors, with Nicole, and think together what are specific concerns, how expedited licensing process may be a huge help for number of ECAP programs to go through the licensing process. Can we use the expedited licensing process, or maybe we have to tweak it? So there's a lot of conversations that need to happen prior to for us to find a way that will be a manageable way and the way that ECAP directors and Head Start directors will understand, and ECAP specifically will get a buy-in. I hope it's helpful. Any other comments, recommendations, questions?
Yeah. So there are a couple of other comments in regards to the ECAP piece in particular. So thinking that some ECAP and Head Start providers are worried that there may be some financial impacts in regard to licensing and it will come as an unfunded mandate. And I think as we're looking at all of these requirements, taking into consideration the financial impacts is what we need to do. But I also think this is part of thinking about what the phase-in and timeline is. I can't speak for Head Start and their funding, but certainly as we look at ECAP funding and what that means for the future, we will need to take that into consideration as we build funding requests and decision packages. And then there was just another comment about some things that we may be able to do as we get closer and we have more of an idea of what this will look like. One of the things that we might consider is having ECAP sites and contractors meet with their local licensing office and go over some of these pieces. That was a suggestion from one of our regional administrators, and so then thinking about how the local licensing office, and certainly we have pre-K specialists who would also be helping contractors working in partnership with their licensing office, thinking about how they can implement some of these changes.
I would love to hear more about what type of fiscal impact it may have on Head Start. So far I haven't heard about it, and it's difficult for me, even having some knowledge about Head Start, to imagine what it could be. So definitely I would love to have a more specific conversation with people who can give me some examples how it may impact Head Start fiscally. So who would it be, who I need to get in contact with? Please shoot me an email, or if you...
Yeah, sorry, Luba, that came from Lori Pittman.
Okay. Thank you. So then, Lori, we will need to get together and see where the possible impact could be. Any other comments, questions? Okay, so let's then move maybe more into the next steps and summary, and Harriet will do that.
Thank you, Luba. Thanks. So I'm going to go into next, but a little wrap-up, basically.
Harriet, we have problems with hearing you.
Can you hear now, Luba?
Yes, it's much better. Thank you.
Is that better? Okay, I'm talking next to the screen. So, so on the page you can see that the work for the alignment project in this calendar year is really moving ahead. There's obviously a lot of activity, but as I think was kind of the part of the discussion on the phone, that there's a lot of interest in having the activity level move out of the department and back into the broader community discussion. And so in addition to the input meetings, Luba also affirmed doing a survey, working with Katie and her group to try to get more input. And we also talked about some other strategies to meet with WASA, basically both around the sort of current development of the standards, and then also to try to get ahead of the curve on something that I do want to acknowledge, and I think everyone's been trying to acknowledge, is really important, which is the movement from the standards into implementation. And so I just want to emphasize here in terms of next steps what Luba just said, that it's already March, and that very shortly in April and May, the department will be turning its attention to implementation issues, and that Luba, is committed already to follow up with people and Nicole and others to make sure that that process is going smoothly and is attended to. So there is a lot of work happening, but I think we did hear pretty loud and clear from people on the call today that the importance, that there's a balance between the importance of the internal work the agency staff has to do to try to do their due diligence and really try to have something that's worth discussing and then some of the feelings people have in the community about being able to see the work and discuss the work and importantly get ready together for the implementation. So I think we have a lot of next steps to do that have been highlighted. Again, the completion of the drafting, the work that we've talked about in terms of the survey and additional meetings, basically beyond the planned community meetings, to make sure that all the different stakeholders are feeling well informed, engaged, and voices heard and included, both in the standards and in the implementation process. So I think we have a little bit more time, and so I would like to make sure just to invite everyone who's on the committee, if you have any other thoughts that you've been thinking about in terms of next steps that haven't been addressed, to please share those with us. Any other ideas you have to help improve the quality of the process and, importantly, the quality of the results from the process. Everybody would like to hear that. And then also, Luba, if there's anything that I missed or you want to emphasize in terms of the department's next steps.
I just would like to summarize a couple of steps that we've talked about and be sure that I will connect with right people to proceed. So with alignment conversation with ECAP and Head Start, would it be Nicole, you the key person that I will have to arrange it? So we will have this conversation and answer the questions of the directors and the ECAP Head Start community?
Yeah, so you and I can connect.
Okay. So Katie, will it be you and I who will, including Frank, who will look at the statewide survey on inconsistencies and duplication, including Head Start, Early Head Start, and other possible program standards, philosophies, and so on?
Yeah, Luba, and I would actually suggest that we also be talking to SEIU because I think that probably those childcare providers also would, we want to make sure that the questions that we ask make sense to everybody.
Okay. So then implementation plan, Harriet already mentioned, maybe we will kind of put a deadline to have some kind of agenda item. We don't know what type of agenda item we will have around the implementation plan on in our April meeting, or at least we will start talking about it. So what are the next steps? And then fiscal impact on Head Start. I will contact Lori. Anyone else would like to be part of the conversation on fiscal impact on Head Start? Please let me know, so then we will loop everyone else who will need to have this conversation. And Lori, if you think about someone specifically who needs to be part of it, please let me know.
Yeah, put me on the list, and I might have a couple of directors who want to get involved in that.
Okay. Any other specific steps that we need to take?
Now is a good time, if you've had an idea, something you were yearning for Dell to be doing, that it hasn't been, or something you really think would be helpful in here. This is a really great time to share so that Luba can respond and try to help push it along.
If you have any more additional ideas, any other specific topics or items or inquiries that will come to your head, please email us, email me directly, so we will proceed. As already mentioned, at our next meeting, we will specifically look at the professional development requirements. I would definitely need your thinking about it. So if you have someone that needs to be part of this conversation, please include the someone to the webinar on the next webinar for the advisory committee. Okay, if there are no more comments or questions or recommendations, thank you so much for being with us today, and have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.